tries to go against them is eventually either bought out or squeezed out or whatever. Percy Schmeiser was a soybean farmer in Canada, and I'll let him give you the details, but he was accused of stealing a product from a very large corporation named Monsanto. And consequently, they sued him. Well, anybody else would have just caved, because Monsanto, of course, is one of the largest corporations on the planet, and definitely one of the 800-pound gorillas in the food and seed industry. But you'd think that no one would have the courage to go against them. But Percy actually responded to their suit in kind and has been fighting Monsanto in the courts ever since the suit came about. So he is giving us the courage to carry on. We do not have to accept GMOs. And, well, I'm going to let Percy tell his story, but I wanted to preface it with a little bit of an introduction.
It's really a pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon. And when I got the invitation, I think way back in February, I'd been in New Mexico before, and I thought, gee, I'd like to come back. So here I am again on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. So thanks to everyone who invited me here today. I might be pausing once in a while because I've just come from Germany, and I needed a translator, and so if I'd speak a sentence or two, I'd had to stop, and every time if I kept going longer, I'd get a kick. But there's nobody to kick me here this afternoon. Now, as was mentioned, I come from Western Canada, in the heart of the grain-growing area of the province of Saskatchewan, and if you'd go 1,800 miles, approximately 1,800 miles straight north, that's where we live, about 200 miles north of the Montana border. My wife and I were known in Western Canada, especially our region east of Saskatoon, our principal airport city, as seed developers and seed savers. I'm sorry, it wasn't soybeans, it was canola. And we had been doing that for over 50 years, developing new varieties of seeds and plants suitable for our local climatic and soil conditions. I should maybe give you a brief background, though. Besides being in agriculture, I was also mayor of my community and councillor for about 30 years or over, and I was also a member of the provincial parliament. And in my role in government as a member of parliament in the province of Saskatchewan, I was on many agricultural committees, both on the provincial and representing my province many times at the federal level in Ottawa. So all my life, I always believed I worked for rules, laws, regulations that I thought would benefit farmers. So that's a brief background. Now, 1996, 4 GMOs were introduced into North America at that time, both US and Canada at the same time, and they were soybeans, corn or maize, whatever you want to call it, and soybeans, and also in our area, rapeseed or canola. So those were the 4 principal crops. Now, there are many, many issues now that have arisen in the 13 years since GMOs have been introduced. And it's no longer what can happen or may happen, but what has happened in 13 years since the introduction of GMOs, as I said, in 1996. There were many things that farmers were told at that time. And if I remember some of the principal things that were told, that I heard that in Germany and Czech Republic last week. First of all, increased yields, less chemicals, more nutritious. But there was also buzzwords that were used when they said Now we'd always have sustainable agriculture. Now we'd be able to feed a hungry world. And that is the same thing I still hear in many parts of the world. Now, there are many issues that arise, as I mentioned before. There's the health issue. There's the control of farmers through contracts, the breakdown of our rural communities, the contamination, the destroying of organic farmers. And one thing I'm going to maybe just start off with is, once you introduce GMOs, there is no such thing as organic farmers. You will destroy the organic farmers, and I'll tell you why later and what has happened to our organic farmers in Western Canada. So 4 crops that were introduced. Now, 1998, 2 years after the introduction, I think I'll go through my case just quickly. 2 years after the introduction of GMOs, Monsanto laid what they called a patent infringement lawsuit against my wife and myself, where they said we were growing their GMO canola without a license from them. And at that point in time, my wife and I didn't even know anybody from Monsanto. We had never bought Monsanto seed, and so you can imagine how surprised we were when we received this patent infringement lawsuit. Now, patents in most countries of the world, including Canada, come under federal jurisdiction. And we decided we'd stand up to them because we felt, and we said to Monsanto at the time, if you have any of your GMO canola in our in our canola seed, then you should be guilty for the damage, and possibly the work of 50 years of research and development was now destroyed. So Federal Court of Canada, one judge. And how often we wish that we could have had a court where there was a judge and jury with farmers on that knew and understood farming. But no, that did not happen. One judge. Now, it took 2 years to go to trial, but in the pre-trial, Monsanto had said that, that they now owned our seeds because they had contaminated us, and through patent law, they now own it. So they had no record or no knowledge that we had ever purchased their seed, and admitted so. So that's the basis it went to the Federal Court of Canada. And after 2.5 weeks of trial, which was quite a long time, this is what the judge ruled, and that's what made the case become internationally known overnight around the world, because it was the first patent infringement case in the world on seeds or plants. And the judge ruled this. First of all, I'll give you just some of the main issues or the conclusions of his decisions. He said it does not matter, and he referred to us, how a farmer is contaminated. And he went on to say if that contamination happens through cross-pollination, direct seed movement, whatever, you no longer own your seeds or plants. They become the ownership of a corporation, in this case of Monsanto, because they have a patent on that gene. So you can imagine, you no longer own your seeds or plants. Second, he ruled we were not allowed to use our seeds or plants again. All our research and development of 50 years now goes to Monsanto. Also, another important issue, he ruled that the level of contamination does not matter. If it's 1%, 2%, 5%, if it's whatever it is, it becomes the ownership of Monsanto. So not only that, but he also ruled we had 1,030 acres in 1998 seeded to canola. And he ruled all the profit from those 1,030 acres from the 1998 crop goes to Monsanto because of the contamination. So we were just devastated when he came down with that decision. And I don't think not only us, but farmers in the northern plains of the U.S. and the prairies of Western Canada realized, and organic farmers realized, how you could wake up tomorrow morning and no longer be an organic farmer if you're contaminated, or you could no longer own your seeds or plants if you're a conventional farmer. So we decided to stand up to Monsanto further, and we applied to the Federal Court of Appeal. Now we had 3 judges, but in the Federal Court of Appeal, you could only address points of law or facts of law or where the trial judge erred in law. You couldn't bring anything else in. And after another 2 years of legal battle in the Federal Court of Appeal, the Federal Court of Appeal upheld the trial judge's decision, although they did not agree with all of the trial judge's decision, and at that point in time it should have been thrown out, but it was not. So we lost 2 battles, probably $300,000 by that time, over 4 years of our life in standing up. And then we had one avenue left, and that was the Supreme Court of Canada. And we were told we have about a 10% chance that the Supreme Court would hear it. But we applied anyway because we said, what more can we lose? And the federal court, it was a great victory for us when the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in our favor, they would hear the case. Now, at the Supreme Court, we could bring in other issues besides patent infringement. And I think some of the other issues are very important to the people that are here this afternoon, because it's all about life. It's the patents of life. Not only the issue of seeds and plants and food, but the whole control of life through the patenting of a gene. And at the Supreme Court, we said this, amongst other things. First of all, we said that a farmer should always have the right to use his seeds from year to year, and if he wants to develop them and do research on them, if he so desires, he should have that right. The other issue, we had said that we have a tremendous loss of academic freedom at our research stations, at our government test plots and so on, where our scientists, our our professors are not free to release the information to the public like they used to, because so much of the funding now at our research universities now come from the private purse instead of the public purse. And we said this has to change. But the most important issue to my wife and myself by that time was that we said no one should have the right to put a patent on life. No individual, no corporation should have that right to control life and own life. And so that was a very important issue for us by that time. So those were some of the issues to the Supreme Court. Now this is what the Supreme Court ruled. First of all, by that time Monsanto had laid, by the time it went to the Supreme Court, they had laid 2 other lawsuits against my wife and myself. One was for $1 million, about halfway through the court cases, where they said, because my wife was arrogant, my wife and I were arrogant, we were stubborn, and would not do what Monsanto wanted. They wanted all their legal bills paid up to a point in time, the disbursements costs, and so on, and that was $1 million. They also, there were some other things they did to stop us. They tried to seize our house, all our farmland, all our farm equipment, to stop us financing our legal battle, because we were taking mortgages out on our property. So those were some of the other issues before the Supreme Court. First of all, on the issue of patent infringement, the Supreme Court ruled this: we did not have to pay Monsanto no money. And that was a great victory. But what was not fair, they also ruled Monsanto has to pay their legal costs. My wife and I have to pay our legal costs up to that point in time. Our legal cost by that time was over $400,000. Monsanto's legal cost was over $2 million by that time. So you may ask, it's a lot easier for a corporation, a billion-dollar corporation, to pay $2 million in a court case, which we said was a test case for them to see how far they could exercise patent law over farmers' rights, than for a farmer like my wife and myself to stand up for the rights of farmers to pay $400,000, and that was not fair. Now, you might ask, why was their bill $2 million, their legal bill? At one point in time, they had 19 lawyers in court. I had 1. Talk about intimidation. But now on the issue of who owns life, the Supreme Court ruled this, and this is very important how they came down with that ruling. Monsanto's patent on a gene or higher life form, or patent on a gene, is valid. And wherever that gene arrives in any higher life form, by whatever means, they own and control that higher life form. Now look at the implications of that. Where does it stop? A seed, plant, bird, bee, animal, even a human being. So now we have more questions than we have answers. Because can they ultimately, by inserting a gene in any higher life form, control or own you or me? So the Supreme Court then said it has to go back to the Parliament of Canada, to bring in laws to protect life and to give farmers their rights back to use their seed from year to year if they want to. Now, we believe that Monsanto thought in 2005, or 2004, when that decision came down, that they had a great victory. But now it has come out, or turned out to haunt them, because if you own and control a higher life form, and you put it into the environment where you cannot control it, as we've found that you cannot control pollen flow or seeds blown in the wind or whatever, then you should be liable for the damages you do. So now we've entered in Canada the liability stage. You own and control that life form, you insert it, you can't control it, you should be liable for the damages you do. So in 2005, or after the Supreme Court decision, we were watching our fields very closely. And in 2005, since we did not want to grow canola anymore, we decided we'd start doing research on mustard, yellow mustard. And we had a field of 50 acres that we were doing this on, where we did not plant, no crop in 2005 to get weeds under control, because we didn't want to use a herbicide. And here in the fall, in October, September, October, we noticed that canola plants were grown on that field, and canola had not been seeded in that land for at least 8 or 9 years. And so we did some testing and with glyphosate, and we found, and we staked the plants out, and we found that the plants did not die. So all through the court system, Monsanto had always said that if a farmer thinks that he has GMO canola in his field, contamination, all he has to do is notify Monsanto. They'll come out and check his field, and they'll do the cleanup. So we notified Monsanto and said, we think you have some of your GMOs canola back on one of our fields. And they came out, and sure enough, about 2 days later, did testing. 2 days later, they notified us and said, yes, indeed, it's their GMO canola back on our field. And they said to us, what do you want done with the contamination? And we said to them, we want every plant on that 50-acre field pulled out by hand. And Monsanto agreed to do this. And it wasn't like if it was totally seeded. It was a contamination where you had plants here, there, or clumps of plants. So they agreed to do this at a certain date. And 2 days, I came home, and my wife was really upset, and to the point of being angry. And she said, you won't believe this. And I said, what happened now? And she said, we got this form from Monsanto by email or fax at that time. And in that release form, she said, and she showed it to me, it said this. It was a non-disclosure statement or a release form. And in it, it said that we could never, ever talk to anyone about the terms of the conditions for the cleanup. In other words, a gag order or freedom of speech or expression would be taken away. That was bad enough. The other issue was we'd have to sign, we could never, ever take Monsanto to court, my wife, myself, or any member of our family, for the rest of our lives, no matter how much they contaminated us in the future on our land. Well, we said, no way. And I said to Monsanto, there is no way we're ever going to give our freedom of speech or sign this document. Well, then they said, we won't remove the plants. I said to Monsanto then, we are going to remove the plants. I'm going to get help. And then they said to us, you are not allowed to do with those plants what you want, because those plants are our plants, and we own them, and they're our property. I said, okay, your property is on my property. Get the so-and-so plants off my property. So anyway, they said, unless you sign the agreement. So then I knew I didn't want the plants to go into seed. I hired 2 of my neighbors, and we removed the plants all by hand. And the bill, I paid my neighbors $640. It should have been a lot more, but that's what they charged me. So anyway, I sent Monsanto the bill, and Monsanto refused to pay it unless you signed the document. Then the battle was on, and so they said, you're not allowed to do the seeds again. They're our property. So eventually, as I said, I sent Monsanto the bill. They wouldn't pay it. So then finally, last year, I took Monsanto to court. I took them under small claims court, $640.
So,
Here, the judge agreed with me and issued a summons, and I had Monsanto in court on a $640 bill. And there was a reason that I done that through that way, through a small claims court, because if I would have went through Court of Queen's Bench or the higher court, Monsanto could have fought me for 2 or 3 years and cost me maybe $30,000, $40,000 why the case should not be heard. But under small claims court, all the judge had to do is agree and issue them a summons. So then I had Monsanto in court, $640, and it was also a $20 court cost. So it went to court on March 19th of this year. And it was the greatest day for my wife and myself, and not only for my wife and myself, it was for farmers all over the world. The judge came in, the court started, Monsanto got up, the lawyers got up, had a check in hand and paid the $660. And so that was a great victory. And the reason for that is it now has set a precedent. If you are contaminated, or organic farm is contaminated now anywhere in the world, at least you have an opportunity to take a corporation, whether it's Bayer, Syngenta, or Monsanto, to court for the damages they do under the liability. So again, I said, after 10 years of legal battle, it was a great victory. Now, I mentioned before there's so many issues that come up with the introduction of GMOs. And I think some of the most important ones is, first of all, what happens when you introduce GMOs. Number one, there is no such thing as coexistence. You introduce GMOs, it will spread, and you no longer will have a conventional farmer or an organic farmer. And it doesn't take long for that to happen. In certain grains, it'll take longer, but especially in canola, it goes very fast. So no such thing as coexistence, no such thing as containment, no matter what type of a buffer strip you use. I heard in Germany and Czech Republic last week, 15 meters, 50 meters. There is no safe distance, and I can tell you from experience, we've had it for 13 years. Now, we no longer have in Canada any pure canola seed left. It is now all GMOs. We no longer have any pure soya left in Canada. It is now all GMOs. They also used to say back in 1996, people had choice, farmers had choice. You no longer have choice when you introduce GMOs. It doesn't matter what type of crop or seed or plant that you put it into. It goes a lot deeper than that. And to tell you some of the problems that organic farmers now have, first of all, they cannot raise those two crops organically because of the contamination. But canola comes from the brassica family. And in that family, you have close cousins as well as distant cousins. Radishes, turnips, cauliflower, mustard, wild mustard. Now through cross-pollination, those market garden crops are now being contaminated with GMOs, making more crops. Organic farmers no longer can raise organically, or conventional farmers raise conventionally. So it takes choice away, and also those crops. What else has happened? First of all, we now have a new superweed on the prairies and the northern plains, which we never ever had before. And that superweed is a regular conventional canola plant that has taken on the genes from 3 or 4 companies that sold GMOs back in the 90s. And so those 3 genes or 4 genes, the GMO genes, are now all in one plant, making it a very difficult plant to control, or a weed to control. And it's in our wheat fields, it's in our barley fields, it's in our towns, villages, new expense for our municipalities, road allowance, and so on. So now we have a new superweed. Now, if you introduce GMOs, you can expect to use 3 to 5 times more chemicals than ever before, just because of that new superweed and the tolerance that has been expressed to chemicals after 3 or 4 years of GMO use. So a massive increased use of chemicals. Monsanto and some of the other companies at that time said, or 3 or 4 years ago said, there is really no problem. We will now come out with a new superweed, a super chemical. And indeed, they have come out with some new super chemicals, not only Monsanto, but some of the other companies. And and one of the new super chemicals is a new type of glyphosate, which is 4 times more powerful than it was in 1996. We also have new types of 2,4-D, which now contain 70% Agent Orange. And we're using this on the prairies and the northern plains. We are killing ourselves now with these highly and more toxic chemicals because of the GMOs that were introduced in 1996. So if you ever introduce GMOs, expect 3 to 5 times more chemical use. Those are some of the issues that arise with the introduction of GMOs. But another issue that I'd really like to talk to you about this afternoon is the closeness of your whole community surrounding your area here. It destroys your basically rural structure or the social fabric of your community. And why do I say that? It's because of the new contracts that they get farmers to sign. And I think I should. And that's an area you never ever hear about. It's another part of the whole story of GMOs. I have in my hand a contract from Monsanto. And in it, it states, first of all, a farmer is never allowed to use his own seed. He must always buy the seed from Monsanto. He must only use Monsanto's chemicals. He must pay Monsanto $15 an acre each year on each acre he owns as a license fee. He must permit Monsanto's police force to come onto his land for 3 years after he signs his contract. They can go in your granaries, they can go in your fields, they can get your tax records, your farming records without your permission. Another one is that if a farmer happens to commit some violation of this contract, he must sign that non-disclosure statement, which they tried to get my wife and I to sign, where he can never tell his neighbor or anyone, the press, what the terms of settlement were. So a total taken away of freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Another clause for 2008, it states here that no matter what happens to your crop, if there's some damages or if the crop didn't perform like it was supposed to, you can never ever take Monsanto to court. So a farmer gives up all those rights. So that's the contract. Now, you may say, why does a farmer ever sign a contract like that? It doesn't matter now whether you sign a contract or not. If you are contaminated against your wishes, whether you're an organic farmer or conventional farmer, you fall under the same conditions as if you signed the contract. Thirdly, if you open up a bag of seed from Monsanto, on the side of the bag it states, by opening up this bag of seed, you agree to all of Monsanto's terms and conditions under patent law number so-and-so. So it doesn't matter whether you sign that contract or not. But why did farmers originally sign it? Was they were invited to a special Monsanto informational meeting, and before the meeting started, you were fed well, you had a beautiful lunch or dinner, and you had a lot of refreshments, and it wasn't only Coca-Cola. And so a lot of farmers didn't read the backside of that contract before they signed it, but they sure found out a year later or 6 months later. Now the issue, well, what happens to our rural social fabric? And as a former politician, I think this is one of the worst things that could have happened to our rural communities. Here's a brochure, and this one is from Monsanto. And here it states, if you think your neighbor is growing Monsanto's GMOs without a license, you should inform on your neighbor. And if you do this, you'll get a free gift from Monsanto. In Western Canada, primarily, you'll get a free leather jacket or free chemicals. Now, this is what happens when Monsanto gets this tipper rumor. And I'm not talking about just a few farmers. I'm talking about hundreds of farmers. They'll send 2 of their police, gene police as we call them on the prairies, to a farmer's home. And they'll say to a farmer and his wife, we have this tipper rumor, you're growing our GMOs without a license. And farmer will say, I'm an organic farmer. I'm a conventional farmer. And I don't want GMOs. I have never bought your seed, and I wouldn't grow it. And they'll say to a farmer, you're lying if you don't confess. We'll take you to court, and by the time you're through with us, with you, you won't have a farm left. So what do you think goes through a farmer's mind when these gene police or Monsanto's investigators leave their home? A farmer will think, well, was it this neighbor or this neighbor here or this neighbor over here that has caused me this trouble? And so now you have a breakdown of farmers working together, farmers suspicious of one another. Who has caused me this trouble? So it's a breakdown of our world social fabric, and I think that is one of the worst things that could have happened. I don't know how many phone calls my wife and I have received with farm women crying on the phone and said, Monsanto's gene police or Monsanto's police have been here. They threatened us that we're growing GMOs. We won't have a farm left. What should we do? And we'll try and advise them where they can get legal help to protect themselves. And as I said, this is not just a few cases. There's hundreds and hundreds of cases that have happened. I often think about my family, my own family. My grandparents came from Europe over 120 years ago, and I'm only a third-generation farmer. And I think back how my grandparents and how my parents had to work together with our neighbors to build up our country, our schools, roads, hospitals, churches, and so on. Now we have that breakdown of our real social fabric. And I think that's one of the worst things, as I said before, that could have happened and is happening with the introduction of GMOs, the destroying of our communities, the divide and conquer attitude. Those are some of the issues, and since I have a little bit of time, and I think it's important, because these are the things that are happening to get control of people through patent law by these corporations. If Monsanto can't find a farmer at home, they can go to the local municipality or county and get the farmer's address and land location. And they'll send a farmer this letter. And the farmers call these extortion letters. And I'll just read you a couple sentences. It says, we have reason to believe you might be growing Monsanto's GMOs without a license. We estimate you have 200 acres, 500 acres, whatever. In lieu of us not taking you to court, please send us $200,000, $100,000 in 2 weeks' time, and we may or may not take you to court because we think you might be growing GMOs. I'm not talking about some third world country. I'm talking about our two countries. And in it, it states also that you're not allowed to show this letter to anyone or we will fine you. So, and then another clause, freedom of speech, you cannot talk to anyone and so on. This is what's happening out in our world society. The total control of our farmers through patent law. Another thing that's it's interesting and it's almost to the point of being funny is that if they can't find a farmer at home and they don't know his mailing address, but they can get the land location, they'll take a small plane or an airplane or a helicopter, fly over the center of a farmer's field, and our fields are normally 160 acres, and they'll drop a Monsanto herbicide Roundup spray bomb on the center of his field, and they'll generally cover about 30 feet. Then they'll fly back in about 12 days after the chemical Roundup has time to activate, and if where they hit with the spray bomb, if the canola has died, they know the farmer was not using Monsanto's GMO Roundup. If the canola did not die, they know the farmer was using Monsanto's GMO canola. That's another avenue they use to check on farmers. So the whole issue of GMOs, remember this, that first of all, I said there's no coexistence. You introduce GMOs into any variety of seeds or plants here in New Mexico, it will spread over your whole state in a matter of a few years. I don't care what type of crop you put it into. You no longer have a choice. GMOs were never ever meant for increased yields or less chemicals or more nutritious. And that's one thing I forgot. In many of the crops now where you have GMOs, the nutritional value is only 50% of organic or conventional food. So your nutritional value also goes down. So, but in that transfer of a gene from one life form to another, to make it resistant to a chemical, to a herbicide, in this case, Monsanto's glyphosate Roundup, you can never ever do it by itself. You have to use promoters, vectors, and in case of canola, you use an antibiotic-resistant marker gene. So besides the gene that's making that plant resistant to a chemical, you also have a new virus, you have a new agrobacteria, and as I said in canola, an antibiotic-resistant marker gene that was never in your food before. So that's another thing you have to look at. I'm not going to go too much into the food issue, but it's a very important issue because of the pharmaceutical plants for prescription drugs are being now produced by plants. It's being done in the open, it's done in the wild, cross-pollination, so you don't even know now if you're eating a food with a prescription drug in. And I think it was absolutely criminal of both our governments, of the US and Canada, to allow this to happen, to introduce it without controls. So it's bad enough. We don't have labeling in North America. In Europe, they have labeling so that people know what they are eating. And I think it's a drastic violation of human rights for both our countries when we, as a parent, don't know what we're feeding to our children, our grandchildren, because we don't have labeling. I know in Canada, about 3 years ago, there was a survey, 91% of the Canadian people said we would not eat GMOs if we knew what was in our food. So I think it would kill the GMO industry overnight if people knew, the consumers knew what was in their food. Those are some of the issues that arise. But to further get control of the seed supply and the food supply, they also have tried to bring in the terminator gene. So if they couldn't get control through contracts, extortion letters, and so on, and as many of you know, but I'll repeat it tonight, this afternoon, a terminator gene is a gene that's put into a seed, and when the seed becomes a plant, the seeds from that plant are sterile and cannot be used again. So you are always forced to go back as a gardener, a tree planter, or a grain grower, or a soybean, canola grower to buy your seed each year, and that would give them total control over the seed supply with the terminator gene. But what they don't tell you, that the terminator gene can cross-pollinate into your organic neighbor's crop, into your indigenous seeds or whatever, if it's in that particular family, and render those seeds and plants sterile also. To me, it's the greatest assault on life we've ever seen on this planet, when corporations want to bring into a gene that can be installed in any higher life form that terminates the future of life. And it was not allowed into Canada, and I don't think it ever will be, and we hope not, but it didn't stop there. Not long ago, they also tried to introduce the cheater gene, a new type of gene which few people have heard about. It works together with the terminator gene. And this is the way it works. Both genes are inserted into a seed. The seed becomes a plant. The plant will not produce the plant will not produce a seed until you spray a chemical on. When you spray the chemical on, the seed is produced, and then the terminator gene kicks in and makes the seed sterile. So that will give them total control of the seed and food supply. And this is what it's all about. It's never about increased yields, feeding a hungry world, sustainable agriculture. It's control of the seed and food supply. So I tried to point out some of the most important issues, and there's a lot more important issue. What about the environment? What about the massive increased use of chemicals? What about our animals, our birds, and a harm to human health? Increased rates of cancer. In my province of Saskatchewan, we use 1/3 of all the insecticides, herbicides, pesticides in our country, in our province. But on the other side, we have the highest rate of breast cancer, we have the highest rate of prostate cancer in our province, and we have less than 1 million people in our province. So that's some of the issues that have happened on human health, but the danger of the environment. So it was not easy for my wife and I to stand up to Monsanto back in 1998. I don't think at that time we ever realized all the implications of what happens when you introduce GMOs. Also, we felt, though, as seed developers, we felt that a farmer always should have the right to use his seeds and plants from year to year and develop them for his local climatic and soil conditions. We were developing new varieties of canola suitable for our region in central Saskatchewan. Probably if we went across the border to Montana or Alberta, or to Manitoba, it might not have done as well because soil conditions are different, climatic conditions are different. So we say in the seed business, one glove does not fit all. And if you ever, what about the future of our seeds and plants and our indigenous seeds and plants? We felt that if you ever get down to one variety of seeds or plants through cross-pollination or direct seed movement and contamination, what happens if you have some disease, some disaster? You have nothing to fall back on for the future generations of those seeds and plants. So that was another reason that we stood up to Monsanto. Monsanto did everything to destroy us. And they would watch us when we worked in our fields. They would sit in their vehicles from morning to night, days at a time. They would come into our driveway where we lived, and they would watch for days at a time what my wife was doing. They never did nothing, but just as an intimidation. She would receive phone calls, and on those phone calls it would say, you better watch it, they're going to get you. And they would go to our neighbors and said, if you would support Percy and Louise Schmeiser, we're going to come after you, and we're going to destroy you just as we're going to destroy them. So you can imagine what that did to our community. People, our neighbors, were scared to talk to us because they felt Monsanto might be watching. And I'll never forget when my wife and I were speaking at the Parliament in Cape Town in South Africa. And coming out of the assembly, we ran face to face with one of Monsanto's representatives from Johannesburg by the name of Wally Green, and he shook his fist in my wife's face and my face and said, nobody stands up to Monsanto. We're going to get you both, and we're going to destroy you somehow, someday. So you can imagine how we felt, how my wife felt with those threats. But that's what we had to live with. Now, if that was not bad enough, as I said, they tried to break us mentally. When that didn't happen, and we were financing our legal battle by taking mortgages on our farmland. And when they found out about that, when Monsanto found out how we were financing our legal battle with them, then they put a lien caveat against all our farmland. They tried to seize our farmland, they tried to seize our house, they tried to seize all our farm equipment, and we had to fight them through court cases every inch of the way. So you could imagine the stress it put on our family and also on our neighbors and our children and grandchildren. And I often, when I used to come home, sometimes being gone for a while, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd think, my God, what am I putting my wife through, my family through, my neighbors through? And I'll never forget what my wife always said. She says, Percy, don't give up. We got to stand up for the rights of farmers all over the world. And I don't think if it wouldn't have been for her, I could never have stood up to Monsanto. And I have to give my wife credit for that. They have also many times have said, the corporations like Monsanto said, there would be no horizontal transfer. By that, they meant that if you ate a food with GMOs, it would pass through your body, or if an animal was fed GMO feed, it would also pass through an animal's body. And that's totally, totally false. It will pass through not only your intestines, but also through your stomach lining, into your bloodstream, and into your body. So there is horizontal transfer. You eat food with GMOs in it, GMOs will eventually end up in your body. And the same thing if you eat a genetic altered BT corn, BT potatoes, BT cotton oil seed, you will also not only have a GMO in your body, you'll also have a new toxin that kills an insect build up in your body. So those are some of the food issues. And the reason I bring that up is that in many areas of the world now, and especially in Western Canada, we no longer can ship our honey to many countries of the world because our honey now is contaminated with GMOs. A bee doesn't know which which flower is GMO and which flower is not, destroying another industry for us in Western Canada. We've lost all of our canola sales to Europe. We can't ship a bushel of canola to Europe. So the economic issue has been devastating to the Western Canadian farmer and also the farmers in the Northern Plains in their shipment of soybeans to many countries of the world, and also corn. So the economic issue also has to be looked at. Those, I think, are some of the important issues. First of all, it was all meant to get control of the seed supply and then the food supply of the world. That's what GMOs are all about. They also, you've heard many other things. They said, well, we'll have drought-resistant wheat and drought-resistant that, or chemical-resistant that. Believe me, it will take at least 25 years from now to come out with a drought-resistant wheat, because not only do you put a gene in, you have to totally restructure that whole plant to produce, say, drought-resistant something. So, and what also bothers me, you'll hear scientists many times say, and I've worked with many scientists in my life, say, we may have, or we could have now found something, but it's always may have or could have something for the future they have found. But in reality, it doesn't work that way, and it surely hasn't worked out with GMOs. I haven't come here today to New Mexico, to your community, to tell you what to do. I've come here to tell you what has happened to us as farmers, as Canadian farmers on the prairies of Western Canada, as farmers on the northern plains of the US, what has happened to us with the introduction of GMOs in 1996. We listened to our governments at that time. We listened to our companies, the corporations like Monsanto, Syngenta, Bayer, and so on, and now we're paying a heavy price for it. And the important thing is with GMOs that once you introduce it, we don't know at this time if it ever can be recalled back. And that's why it's so important. It's like Pandora's box. Once you open it, it's over and it's over. And what the decisions we make today will not only affect us, but will affect generations to come. And that's why it's so important. My wife and I, we have 5 children. We got 15 grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild and 1 on the way. And what kind of a future do we want to leave to the future generations? Because the future we leave now is in our hands. And the decisions we make today is, as I said, will affect generations to come. And I don't think anyone here this afternoon, including myself and my wife, want to leave a legacy of our land, our food, our soil, our air and water full of poisons. And that's what's happening with GMOs. And we can stop it by the decisions we make today. And I don't think none of us want that kind of a future with our land, our air, our water, and soil full of poisons. None of us want that. And so that's some of the reasons that I take the time now to travel around the world to bring this awareness of what can happen with GMOs. We have had 13 years of it, and we've seen now not what can happen or may happen, but what has happened with the introduction of GMOs back in 1996. One good side to this is that since 1996, 13 years of GMOs, there has been no new GMOs allowed into Canada. They wanted to bring in GMO wheat, GMO alfalfa, GMO rice, and there was one other one, GMO flax, and it was not allowed. There was almost a revolution when the people heard that they wanted to introduce more GMOs, new GMOs, because we saw the damage, the damage by the poor that was done to us in 1996. So no new GMOs were allowed. So I often say in many countries of the world now when I travel in Asia or Europe, if we are stopping it in Canada, and I'm sure you're going to be stopping it here in the US, why do you want to introduce any more new GMOs? So that is my reason for being here today, to bring you awareness. But you cannot say in 2 years from now, if you introduce it now here for some reason, you cannot say 2 years from now you didn't know. And we didn't have anybody to come and tell us as farmers in both our countries in 1996 what would happen. At least you have that choice. So the choice you make in the very near future will be your choice. And I hope you make the right choice. I mentioned before, there are many issues. I tried to cover the contamination issue. I tried to cover a little bit the environmental issue, but most of all the social issue, the breakdown of a real social fabric issue, And so, as I said, there's so many issues that come up. Probably on the food issue, I could have talked 2 hours alone, and I think I will stop here now so that you have a chance to answer questions, because I know I didn't cover a lot of areas. My wife has a very deep faith, and I think without that, we could never have survived. And often what would really bother me is that many times, also when I'd come home, she would say to me, she often felt that she prayed more at night than what she slept, so that we could stand the pressures of this corporation. To me, in my opinion, and I've dealt, because of a politician, my role as a mayor and councillor, my role in business, that there are a lot of good corporations out there, but there's a lot of corporations out there are not so good, and all they look at is the bottom line. And to me, Monsanto, not only because I had a battle with them, to me, in my opinion, they're one of the most vicious companies on the face of the earth. They only look, there's no moral, there's no ethical issues, and believe me, with GMOs, you do have a moral and ethical issue, because no one should have the right to grow a plant that will contaminate and destroy the ability of your organic farmer to make a living, or a conventional farmer. No one should have that right. So we do have a lot of moral and ethical issues with the introduction of GMOs. So with that, as I said, my wife and I gave a commitment in 1998 when we stood up to Monsanto that as long as we have life within us, that we will go down fighting for the rights of farmers all over the world, always to have the right to use their own seed from year to year. Thank you, and God bless, and thanks for bringing me here.
"15 minutes for questions, and please come up to the microphone. I do not have the roving mic anymore, so.
Percy, do you know what's going on in terms of native corn pollution with GMOs?
I hate to answer it, but I will answer it. But I am told that at least half of the corn in Mexico now is contaminated with GMOs, and I have that from pretty good authority with GMOs. And I also understand there's quite a bit of corn now in Guatemala that's also contaminated with GMOs. I have spent quite a bit of time in Mexico and Guatemala.
Muchísimas gracias por su participación.
Thank you so much for your participation.
Nosotros la próxima semana va a haber una reunión de Monsanto
Next week there's going to be a Monsanto meeting
en la ciudad de Cuauhtémoc, Chihuahua,
in Cuauhtémoc City, Chihuahua,
para acabar de convencer a los agricultores que tienen de 10 hectáreas para arriba.
to try to convince all of the farmers who are farming more than 10 hectares.
El movimiento campesino no indígena está organizando un plantón
The non-indigenous farmers movement is organizing a plantón, a demonstration.
A mí me fascinaría, yo voy a llevar su palabra a los compañeros campesinos que siembran maíz para el mercado.
I'm going to take your words down to the farmers who plant corn for the marketplace.
Nosotros estamos en el movimiento sin maíz no hay país,
We belong to the movement without corn there's no country.
y comida de los campesinos para México.
And food produced by farmers from Mexico.
Y nosotros vamos a proponer invitarlo a usted.
And we are going to propose that you be invited to join us.
Y nos encantaría que estuviera por allá.
And we would love it if you could join us there.
Thank you very much.
Actually, I had a question too. I was wondering, in terms of you were paid $640 by Monsanto, but how can we measure the economic import of the kind of damage that's being done to us through these things? Is there any way to get more money out of these people than just say what you paid your neighbors to pull up the weeds?
I could have went after Monsanto at the same time on the economic loss because I couldn't use that field next year for mustard research. But I was interested at that time only. Maybe in hindsight I should have, but it was easier just coming after them for the contamination issue and the cleanup than to bring many issues in at that time. I never ever thought at that time that Monsanto would ever settle in court without a long legal battle, and my wife and I were prepared another 7-8 years and probably $200,000-$300,000. But we would not have had the help from people all over the world with donations. We could never have done it. And so it took, Monsanto might have had a company, but we had a world army of people behind us.
What is your understanding of why the judges have decided thus far in favor of Monsanto, except for that one case for the $640?
Well, Monsanto agreed to pay. It wasn't a court decision, but you have to go back to the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court ruled Monsanto's patent on a gene is valid, and wherever that gene arrives in any higher life form, by whatever means, they own and control that life form. So you might go to a patent office and get a patent on the most deadliest poison on the face of the earth. That doesn't give you the right to introduce it in the environment where it might destroy or kill people. And it's the same thing with Monsanto and the other companies. They now know that if they introduce a GMO, it cannot be contained. You cannot have coexistence, so you destroy the ability of conventional or organic farmers to make a living. So no one should have that right. So that's why I think maybe Supreme Court judges in their wisdom at that time worded it that way. I hope I've answered your question. Okay, I mentioned it to one person I was talking at lunchtime. When Monsanto came after me for $1 million, at one point in time, in about halfway through the cases, I stood up to them, my wife and I stood up to them, so they had to release how they arrived at the $1 million for the damages from us. This is what they said, $750,000 of that up to that point in time for their legal costs, $250,000 for disbursement costs, like whether it's court fees, this fees and that. But there was one very interesting item where they wanted from me. They paid $30,000 to a scientist that worked for Ag Canada, who was one of the ones that gave them regulatory approval to introduce, to testify on Monsanto's behalf. And he testified that all the documentation that he submitted to the court and to the government was what Monsanto wanted him to say. He got paid off for $30,000. How many of our other scientists that receive grants at our universities on certain projects? That's all I'm going to say on that.
I have quite a few comments on this, and you're not alone.
You'll have to raise it up, I think.
I fought the University of New Mexico, the state of New Mexico, all the way to the Supreme Court pro se. And the reason I did it without lawyers pro se is that they would have eaten me alive with lawyer bills, which you've been experiencing. And I want to encourage people to be aware of your rights, be aware of the Constitution, and they provide tools for you to use. One of the more interesting things about this situation, I think, is the fact that your courts have held that Monsanto is responsible for these organisms they release into the wild. Then why is their organisms going onto your property not malicious criminal trespass? If you remember, O.J. Simpson got off on criminal charges and got nailed on civil. We have a situation here where corporations are getting off on civil charges and should be nailed on criminal charges. I want to tell you just how far they're going right now. when I was slapped with an unlimited damages suit by the University of New Mexico. I pointed out that they're falsifying data under my name in the patent office to make me criminally responsible for the fraud because it's under my name, and I had no choice but to protest that. However, in so doing, they violated my First Amendment rights to tell the truth about my research. And the fact that they held that up with judges all the way to the Supreme Court suggests that those judges making those decisions are committing treason because they're sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States. They seized my technology and the things that I discovered, violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. They denied me a right under the Seventh Amendment to the Constitution for a jury trial for anything worth more than $20. So you should have had a jury trial, you would have had a jury trial in this country if the judges are upholding the Constitution and not committing treason. Because they filed for unlimited damages, if they had won, they would have owned me for the rest of my life. That's a violation of my 13th Amendment rights that guarantee that Americans will not be subject to slavery in this country. Now, do you understand why the Supreme Court refused to hear this case? It's because our judges are corrupt, our government is corrupt, and if you want to stimulate the economy, we need to impeach the government officials responsible for this mess and the federal judges that are making a mockery of our Constitution. These famines that you talk about in monocultures have already happened. The Irish potato famine is a classic example of everybody growing the same damn tomato and it wiping out the entire agricultural base for the entire country, where the Irish had no way of surviving other than to flee in panic to try to find food to live long enough to rebuild their lives. You remember this saying in this country, Irish need not apply? We will all be refugees if this happens through our global agricultural basis. I'm wondering about invasion of privacy. Sounds like you've been through it. And is it Monsanto or Mafia that we're talking about? Because, quite frankly, I have heard and read definitions of extortion that say the threat of a lawsuit alone, even if no money exchanges hand, the threat of a lawsuit for any purpose to acquire funds from anybody is considered extortion. Now, there may be lawyers in this room or people that know a lot more about it than I do, but I think one of the keys to surviving something like this is to think outside the box, because the legal establishment hates creative thought, and they hate people that will bring up points of law such as these, like the violation of our very Constitution of this country, as ways of defending yourself. So I applaud you, and I thank God you're there fighting for us, because that's what it takes. It takes every good person in this world to fight for a better world, because all it takes for evil to triumph is one good person to do nothing. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that's not a question. I bow to your determination and God bless you, because you were probably fighting more intelligent people than I was.
Thank you. You know, Monsanto's representatives or their gene police will go into any farmer's field they choose. They'll take, and I'm not scared to use the word steal, either leaves or seeds from a farmer. If a farmer happens to catch them in his field, and I have pictures of Monsanto's representatives in a farmer's field and trespassing, and a farmer will say, "Get out of my field, you're trespassing." They'll say to a farmer, "Make us." And the farmer may say, "Well, we'll take you to court." And they'll say, "Go right ahead and take us to court." And so there's one young farmer, I went with him to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, And the sergeant said, he said, you know what you're getting into. He said, they're going to fight you, and you won't have enough money by the time they're through with you. So they know by the power of money, they can take your rights away, and they are doing that to farmers because the farmer cannot stand up to them. Another point, I'm really concerned about our academic community, the control of our future scientists, professors, and so on. And the reason I say that, I have 6 grandchildren right now in university. What kind of a future are they going to have in academic freedom if all their programs are going to be funded by corporations and they're not free to release to the public? And that's one thing I found very different. About 6 weeks ago, I was invited by the Parliament of Russia, the Duma, to speak, and also from the City Duma of Moscow. And I find that there's more release of information in regards to what GMOs are causing and in the food issue than we have in North America. I have to go to Germany, Switzerland, Japan, School of Science in Japan, now Russia, to find out about GMOs. What's happening in our 2 countries when we don't get that information? So our academic freedom also is at stake. I felt so strong about this that 2 years ago, I took my country of Canada, and it was hard to do so, to the United Nations Human Rights Commission in Geneva, and charged Canada for the drastic violations of, first of all, that we don't know what's in our food, which I think is a drastic violation. We should all know what's in our food. And secondly, our academic freedom. There was about 6 or other issues that I brought before the United Nations Human Rights Commission. So my wife and I had to try to do everything to bring this to the forefront, how we are losing our freedom, our freedoms.
Well, gracious thank you to you and your wife for your prayers and time and effort on being the buffer zone to Monsanto, because Monsanto truly is wrong. And I actually have sort of a 3-part question, if that's all right. First, to me, seed sources, that's what's being kept away from our common knowledge, is where are the seeds? Because after all, that's their manifested creation is always stored somewhere. And are they required to have a patent number on any of the bags that are sold, or the transportation between the North America or to any of the patent office? And please, I'd like to thank that gentleman too for explaining what he's been through. But that's kind of the first part. The other is, indigenous seeds. How does a person, let's say there's a young person, a youth that wants to be a peanut farmer again, and what trust level is there that there won't be a Terminator seed there won't be a GMO or anything? Is there any trusted secrets that you could handle on that part? And then also, New Mexico, as far as the state university, I may be wrong, but received this study, air quotes, study of the for industrial hemp as an agricultural product. I believe that they received the bid or the thing on that, and how is that academic environment, how are they going to be able to buffer that out of the, Monsanto out of the picture?
I think I answered some of that at the beginning, but first of all, in the transfer of seeds, you will always have a spillage. If a farmer grows GMOs in the harvesting, in the seeding, in the transportation, in the rail movement, in the semi-truck movement, you're always going to have spillage. So it's spread by those ways and those conditions, also through cross-pollination. And that's why when they wanted to introduce the 4 new crops back in Canada, they were not allowed, because we saw what has happened with the 4 that were introduced. As I mentioned before, once you introduce it, it's over. And we don't know, as I said, it's over and it's over, and we don't know if it's ever calling back. But the dangers of the loss, what about Bolivia, where point of origin of potatoes came from? What about Mexico, point of origin of corn? What's happening there? You see, and those are tragedies, and it should never been allowed to be introduced. But we were told it's a new technology of the world. If you're not part of it, you're going to be left behind. You're going to be a third world country.
I wanted to thank you first for your perseverance and your faith, your strength, your courage, and your wife as well, and your whole family. And just to mention that there were people trying to bring GMOs into our chili here in New Mexico. I believe that has been repelled up to this point. I don't know for sure. The legislature just funded it? Well, my question is, how are you still maintaining your economics? Do you need donations? Would it help you to go to Maria's community if you got more funding?
Okay, what we done? The original amount we had almost totally paid off, and then when which was over $400,000, but the last issue cost us around $10,000 or $15,000, and we have one down to $5,000 or $6,000. We have a trust fund and a website, and on there, if a person wants to make contributions, it'll help pay off that last legal bill. But the big portion has been paid off. My website is www.percyschmeiser.com. Percy, P-E-R-C-Y, and Schmeiser, S-C-H-M-E-I-S-E-R. So that's what helped us to do it. But, you know, I've spent 10 years of my life of it with no other income and just from what we had from our farm. And we felt it was so important with the whole issues of GMOs to bring this awareness.
First of all, I've been following your story for a number of years through Acres, and it's a real honor to have you here and to get to hear your story firsthand. I really feel blessed, and thank you so much for your work. I encourage everybody to contact our legislature to protest the GMOs of our dear, wonderful New Mexico chilies. We really need to keep them pristine. Is there any good news? Are we winning anything on this front?
I think we really are. You just mentioned about the New Mexico legislature. I think a question should be put to them. When you introduce GMOs, you're going to be immediately faced. I don't know what type of healthcare system you have, but anyway, you can expect a massive increase in healthcare costs. The government of Ontario came behind me as an intervener, or I think in the United States you call it Friends of the Court, and that was in regards to the increased healthcare costs. They estimated that with the introduction of GMOs, you can have an increase of at least 4 times in your healthcare costs. Now, I'll give you an example that they used in the Supreme Court. Already 2 genes in breast cancer treatment are patented. And it's patented by a company from Salt Lake City. And before that treatment can be used, you have to pay that company a license fee. If a hospital or a government research station wants to do further research on that breast cancer treatment, they cannot do it unless they pay another license fee to this company. Others, if they want to do further research, you cannot do it. So our total healthcare system, our whole health issue will come under the same issue of control over farmers under seed supply will come over the total control of your healthcare system. So there's many issues that you have to look at. And that's why I said I probably could talk an hour here just on the food issue alone. So there's many, many issues.
Okay.
that was an extraordinarily sobering presentation. And again, it kicks us right back to the very beginning of this symposium 3 years ago. There's a reason why it's called the Food and Seed Sovereignty Symposium, because this is the issue. And he just took us right back to the beginning. But it's important to go back to your roots every once in a while, even though we talk about nutrition and we talk about sustainability and these sort of things. But this issue was the key issue. Before we bring on the panel on Water is Life, my associate is going to make a comment on that he asked me to allow him space to make a comment, so I'm going to do that.
Thank you much again, Paul, for all this presentation. I want to make one comment what happened here. This year, actually, we are looking for organic seeds of the alfalfa, and we are not able to find organic seeds. You can find anywhere GMOs. That's how it's coming the industry and beginning to control. The way he was there saying, Percy, to have, for example, seeds, they can be under control of the corporations. It's so important for us, or for each one in this room, they can begin to grow his own and preserve his own crops and seeds, because we don't know what's in the back of your door. It's so important to thinking how we can begin to fighting not only this type of the corporations. We saw already people, they can come with this mentality to thinking about the future generations. We have to be alert, and we have to have the possibility or the chances maybe to take Percy to other places where they can give the alert to these people, because you go to South America, you go to Central America, every single place is beginning to be full of the GMOs and beginning to grow these kind of the things. We are not have anymore the possibility to exchange seed for other farmers. We have, for example, this gentleman from Kenya, or Nepal, I'm sorry, asking him, no one single seed, they cannot be GMOs. That's how it's going this planet. That's how it's going all over of this world with the corporation. They want to begin to control us. The same person was mentioned to you before. These GMO seeds, they need more fungicides, herbicides, or pesticides to be applied in the growing season of the crop. Thank you much again, Percy, for your presentation. We would like to have you here so many other times to educate to our people and take into alert to this situation. Thank you also to you for coming and stay in this presentation.
I think it's very important. I should mention to you that Monsanto now has gone from one of the world's largest chemical companies. They are now the world's largest seed company. They went on to on a massive buying spree, spending over $12 billion buying up seed companies around the world. Now that's bad enough, but a lot of those seed companies were organic seed companies, and they just bought a large one out of California. I was speaking in BC along the coast in July, and a lot of the organic farmers are very concerned will be able to get certain organic seeds because of the control of some of the organic seed companies by Monsanto. So that's another area you have to be very concerned about, the future supply of organic seeds.
Thank you, Percy, again. Also, I think it's time to reconsider GMO-free New Mexico. Okay, so the next panel is